Welcome to the podcast where we talk about home building, business, and everything in between. Today's guest will be focusing on leadership and mental health. John Brogden had an illustrious career in politics and also in the private sector, and is the current president of Lifeline International. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the beginning, shall we, to start off. What was life like in the early days, and what were some of the major learning curves that helped shape who you are today?
Wow, that's a very big question. So I was born in Balmain in 1969. I like to say it was, it was the last year the Balmain Tigers won the grand final, and I was born in 1969. Mum reckons half of Balmain was conceived after the grand final in 1969. Mum was a secretary, Dad was a carpenter. Mum's dead now, Dad's 92 and enjoying moderate health but very keen to live, which I think's I think you get to a stage where it's all up here, you know, subject to a very bad illness or a likely death from an illness. I actually think at a stage it's all up here about whether you want to live, which might tie into our later conversation. So we moved to Haberfield when I was 5, when it wasn't trendy. Went to the local Catholic school, St Joan of Arc, and then, like all of the Catholic schools in those days, the boys had to leave at the end of year 4 to go to what was traditionally a brothers' school, and I went to the Christian Brothers School at St Patrick's at Strathfield. And, we weren't poor, but we certainly weren't rich. You know, there were no overseas holidays at all. You had one pair of jeans, you didn't have 3 pairs of jeans, that sort of stuff. And my parents had a very difficult marriage. You look back and except for the outcome of me and my sister and my brother, it was a very unhappy marriage, and they probably should never have got married. But we had a very difficult time that led to them divorcing when I was 13. Interestingly, we welcomed that as kids because it stopped the fighting, it stopped the tension, it stopped the difficulty that we were experiencing. The downside was that my mother had been seeing a guy on the side, and, you know, that's pretty scandalous when you're 13, but the older you get, you realise people who aren't happy have other relationships. So I'm less judgmental as I get older. But sadly for her and for us, he was very physically abusive, what we now know and we now call coercive control. He was very controlling in terms of money, in terms of her friendships, in terms of her family. He literally just shrunk her life down to where he controlled everything. And it got to a point where we just had to leave home, the 3 of us. I was 18, my sister was 19, my brother was 15, and it became completely untenable when we found out that he was beating her up. And he was a real coward. He would beat her in places that she could dress over, so they weren't obvious. So for me, my school was my great refuge from home. So I loved school. I loved St Patrick's, Strathfield. I was the vice captain. I'll never get over the fact that I wasn't the captain. People think that's funny. My wife knows it's true. But I loved school. I loved it. And it became, as I said, my refuge, and it became the normal thing in my life. And I like to say that to the extent that I've had success in my life, my school had a lot to do with it in terms of setting me up. And interestingly, because I liked school, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. So I started studying primary school teaching, and I realised it wasn't for me, and I left that and went to be a staffer, as they call them, an advisor in politics. So I wasn't a sporty kid. You know, I gave rugby a go, and, you know, I was in the 3rd 15 rugby at school. There was a 4th 15, so I wasn't quite at the bottom. But I got involved in other things, very involved in the school life and drama and debating and all those bits and pieces. So,
which set you up for future success. And yeah. I also read that you had a fascination with politics.
Yes.
You would buy the Sydney Morning Herald most days and then the Bulletin on a Wednesday.
Correct.
But just coming back, I
We need
also...
to explain what the Bulletin is because it's long gone. So every Wednesday there was a national affairs magazine that had been around since the 1880s or something called the Bulletin, and the Herald was 30 cents. So on the Wednesday it was $1. It cost me $1.
Big outlay.
Well, back then it was for a student. But yes, I was always interested in politics.
And your grandmother also played a big part in your life. And I found it fascinating reading this. You said, or she quoted, correct me if I'm wrong, that I never had a job, but I worked every day of my life.
Yes, it's a fantastic line. So she was a great philosopher in her own way. So Nan, Brenda Bourne, Nan as we all called her, so she had 9 children. One of them died during the Depression from diphtheria. And my mother was so there were 6 girls in a row, then 3 boys. My mother was the youngest of the girls. And they were Balmain through and through. And my grandmother was full of, some might call it homespun philosophy, but things like that, things like, I've never worked a day in my life. Sorry, never had a job, but I've worked every day of my life. And that's, when I lived with her for 3 years, from 18 to 21. And, when I moved in, I'll never forget the first day I went down for breakfast and she'd made me 2 eggs and bacon and toast. I thought, it's the middle of the week, not a Sunday treat. I said, Nan, I'm going to have a heart attack. Well, you've got to go to work with a proper meal.
Might need to check your cholesterol.
Yes, well, that's right. And my grandfather had been an electrician, so he hadn't been going to city in a tie and suit every day, but I had become one of those people after when I went into work in politics. And I'll never forget, when I moved in, I had 5 business shirts, 3 white, 1 blue and 1 striped. And Nan said, and she would wash everything. She'd starch them. She'd make her own starch. On one occasion, she starched my shirt and it looked like, I could barely get my arms through the shirt. But the sleeve, she said, John, you've only got 3 business shirts. I said, I've got 5, Nan. She said, you've only got 3 white shirts. I said, but you can't wear them to the city. So she was wonderful, very loving, very forgiving, bit of tough love as well. I love to tell the story that I came home one Friday night, from work, and I was 19 or 20, so I'd been on the Terps that night on a Friday night, and I came home and I went upstairs. She lived in a lovely terrace home in Balmain, and I left one shoe on one step and one on another, and the tie was here and the coat was there. She never said a thing. Jeremy never said a thing. She just, at 6 a.m. in the morning, she started vacuuming my bedroom around my bed. Never said a thing, So she was wonderful to live with. And she, probably the best philosophy she gave me of politics was be careful about the people you climb over on the way up because you need them on the way down. And it was a very good lesson. And I've seen people in politics who just, slit the throat of people that they
ruthless.
Friends one day, then they just destroy them to keep going up the ladder. But it was a great lesson that, and it's why for me, loyalty really matters and ingratitude is a cardinal sin. I think people who've been good to you, particularly if they've been good to you when they didn't have to be, or they support you so strongly and advocate for you personally in a career or whatever it might be, I find that it's important to return that and to show gratitude for that, because there are very few people who can honestly say that they're where they are because of themselves alone. Most people had different sorts of help along the way. It doesn't have to be $1 million from mum and dad. It could just be a door being opened or advice being given or, in many cases, of course, tough advice being given. For God's sake, don't do that. What are you doing? Don't wear that. You don't look right. I was listening to you having that conversation. You need to do it this, but those sorts of things, because they all do make a difference. And loyalty, I think, matters in life. Loyalty does matter. And it's challenging loyalty because sometimes the people to whom you're loyal do the wrong thing and do bad things.
I think loyalty too is all about giving that frank feedback.
Oh, it is.
Albeit sometimes it's not what the direction of that person is looking for or
Absolutely.
taking.
Absolutely. And often you take it very hard, that sort of advice, but, hopefully you go away and brood on it and come back and say, actually, I think you're right or half right and help me. How do I fix that problem? I've never ceased to be amazed by the number of people who are happy to give advice if you ask for it. And the only way to structure it, I think, that makes a big difference is if you know what you want. It helps somebody to give you advice if you're telling them where you think you should go or what the rails are in your life. If you say, what should I do? You're almost giving too much power to that person. So it does help if you have that, or if you bring them dilemmas and be very honest. Honesty, I think, is important. It's now called authenticity. People talk about that. I've been told in my life that I'm too honest, I'm too open, and sometimes you are taken advantage of. But in the majority of instances, I always say it saves time. It saves time just to make an assessment, this is a person I can trust and share with them, or the reverse, I can't trust this person and not share with them. Equally, I'm pretty tough on people who don't show loyalty and don't show gratitude for things that I've done for them when I think it's appropriate they do that. And I've been very lucky, particularly in politics, the number of people I've helped along the way who are extremely grateful to this day for what I've done. And I just think that's me being true to myself on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, it's a wonderful philosophy. Talking about entering politics, Balmain notoriously Labor driven.
Yeah.
I dare say your grandmother may not have been too happy with your choice in that political party, the Liberal Party. And I remember a quote. You said your Auntie Kate was crying when you told her that
So I went
you joined
home
politics
to Nan.
on the wrong side.
That's right. I went home to Nan and said, Nan, I've joined the Liberal Party. And she said, don't worry, love, that's a passing phase you'll go through. and Auntie Kate lived next door. Auntie Kate was my grandfather's cousin. And I went in to tell her and she cried, oh, what have you done, love, what have you done? She was devastated. But I was certainly the black sheep in, the use of the word black makes it sound very dark, doesn't it? But I was the odd one in the extended family.
Well, you definitely had a crack.
Yeah, and I did. And I find one of the great things I find from time to time, less now than before because politics is getting very very polar. You've got to be hard right, and if you don't agree with everything I'm saying, you're wrong, and you've got to be hard left, and if you don't agree with 99% isn't good enough. You've got to agree with 100% of what I say. Well, that's just not life, right? That's not life. But I had a wonderful experience when I ran for pre-selection. Pre-selection I lost. My wife Lucy and I married, first living in Bondi, and the local seat came up for pre-selection and I ran for it. And this was when the Republic debate was brand new, and the New South Wales Young Liberals, where I was president, were the first part of the Liberal Party in Australia to come out in favour of the Republic. And that was very public and also very well known in the Liberal Party. So I arrived at this lady's home and she opened the door, and this is to lobby her for her vote. And Lucy and I went there. She opened the door and literally the first thing she said to me is, why do you hate the Queen? That's the first thing she said. I thought, oh, God, this vote. I'm not getting this vote.
This is going to be an uphill battle.
I'm not getting this. Anyway, we had a lovely talk. I was probably the age of her own kids. The next thing we're staying for dinner and it's a lovely night. And when I lost the pre-selection, she came up to me afterwards crying. And I think my lesson from that was in public life and in politics, in business, people will support you if you stand for something, even if they disagree with what you stand for, unless it's going to destroy their life and their business, their livelihood. But in that case, that woman said, I think you're a good young man. I think you've got lots of potential. There's one issue I don't agree with you on, but I've spent some time with you. I heard you speak in this pre-selection process and I voted for you. So I do think the lesson out of that is there's one thing people hate more than politicians who don't believe in something. It's politicians who believe in something and won't stand by it. And I have lots of friends who run for pre-selections, and often you sit down with them and help them with their speech and their questions. And they'll say, I've got a real challenge here on this issue. Used to be abortion. It's probably now things like gender issues and homosexuality, etc. And I always say, don't lie, tell the truth. Because you're going to get found out on a lie anyway. And people think, well, if they're willing to change their opinion on that, they're willing to change their opinion on anything and everything. So there's no backbone to that person. So I've always said, be yourself and tell the truth. but at the same time acknowledge that others are entitled to have an opinion. I think this view that I take this view, you take the opposite view, I have no respect for you and your view, I think life's too short for that. With exceptions, things like, gross racism and the like, I think I'd rule out of that equation. But on some issues, it's okay for people to disagree. In fact, I think we've lost the civility of disagreement in recent times.
Coming back to your pre-selection experiences, I counted, you had 3 losses: Drummoyne, Vaucluse and Pittwater.
The first Pittwater, correct. You've done some homework.
Yeah. What did that teach you about failure, but getting back up, dusting yourself off and having another crack?
So Vaucluse I ran for at 2021. Drummoyne I was 2021. Vaucluse was a couple of years later. I was 24 and I was 26 when I ran for Pittwater. And we didn't live in the electorate. In those days, you could get away with coming in from outside the electorate and working hard and establishing yourself. So there was a Liberal, me, who wasn't a local, and there was a local who just joined the Liberal Party. And we ended up being the last 2 candidates, and that bloke beat me. And I remember thinking there are 2 ways to go here. One is to get very bitter and very angry and blame people. The other one is to just realise this is how things happen and get off the ground, to your point, Jeremy, and have another go. So what I did to demonstrate that is I rang the bloke who beat me. John Harker was his name. I rang John and said, mate, congratulations. If you want me to join your campaign committee and come and help, I'd love to do it. I'd be really happy to help. Your decision, but I'd be happy to help, because I wanted to show people I hadn't taken the toys and gone home. And I meant it very genuinely as well, because I wanted the Libs to maintain their hold on that seat, our hold on that seat. As it happened, this guy had said and done a few things that were very controversial, and the Labor Party in Parliament banged away and banged away and banged away, and the opposition leader then, Peter Collins, said to the party, this guy's got to resign as the candidate. We need a better candidate. So I won the pre-selection.
And that was all in about 2 weeks, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was very rapid fire. So the lesson is this: if I'd whinged and whined and attacked him and told everybody else they were bastards for not supporting me or any of that sort of stuff, it would have been very hard to win that pre-selection, because people would have said, no, he's not the right guy. Look at him. This is how he reacts with a loss. We don't want him. Who else is on the list? But because I genuinely and honestly thought, no, I need to show people, you win some, you lose some. When you lose, you congratulate the opponent and you get up and have another go. So that was I didn't expect the guy to fall over in 2 weeks at all. Didn't anticipate that at all. It's also that great, there are second chances in life. I had not anticipated I'd be the candidate 2 or 3 weeks after I lost.
Even that's a great life lesson for people, our viewers and listeners who are working in corporate, small business. Yeah. They don't get the promotion. Don't throw the toys out of the pram, Put your support behind them.
Exactly right. The lesson, that life lesson in your career, right, is how do you take a knock on the chin? And it's often how people handle the tough times better than the good times that show your character. Bob Carr was my opponent as Premier. Bob Carr led the Labor Party from a massive loss in 1998 until his retirement in 2005. Long time, Premier for 10 years. Very successful politically, a Premier. What formed him, what made him what he was as Premier? 7 years in opposition, 7 years as a loser, if I can use that phrase, 7 years without staff, not in government, not being able to do anything, people thinking you're a loser, people not wanting to talk to you. That's what formed him. That's what put the steel into him. So it's often it's mostly how you deal with the tough times. So exactly right, you don't get a promotion. Okay, am I going to go and whinge? Am I going to sook and sulk? Or am I going to say, fair enough, that's the boss's decision, they've got the entitlement to that decision, so I make 1 or 2 decisions. I hang around, keep going, or I go somewhere else because I've been given an indication that I'm not up for that promotion at that time. But the same applies, right? What if that person who got the job implodes, and they're looking around the place with contractors, right? Why burn your bridges? I did learn a great saying about never burn your bridges, which is you can burn any bridge you like just as long as you've crossed it, which I think I don't know whether I agree with that, but it's a very funny line. It's a very good reverse to the, don't burn your bridges. But it's what you want to be known as. Do you want to be known as somebody who takes a knock and comes back? It's almost a line that's been very generously ascribed to me, is it's not about the setback, it's about the comeback. And I think people look at that, how do you cope with difficult times? Because there are difficult times in life. I've got a theory that one of the reasons we're seeing so many young people with mental illness these days is, I think 20 or 30 years ago we said to every young person, every day is going to be a dream. Every day is going to be a Disney story. You'll never have it. You are entitled to every day being a great day. Well, grandma dies, grandpa dies, you lose a job, your relationship breaks up, you don't get a job, your football. Lots of things go wrong in life, and you need to be prepared to bounce back from them. And I think that lack of what we now call resilience, that lack of a bit of toughness, you don't have to be ruthlessly tough. You don't have to be completely unemotional, but you need to know there are downs that will come in life. It's completely inevitable for a teenager that Nan's going to die, right? That's just the way the demographics work. And you need to be prepared for that rather than being told every day is a Disney show and
That's right.
you never have a bad day. So that is being seen as a bit of change in the workplace as well. And it is a challenge, right? Because we don't always see our way through. There's the great one of those great stories about the two brothers. One's an optimist and one's a pessimist, and they say in that room's a $1 million, right? And the optimist goes in and it's buried under a pile of manure. This $1 million. The optimist says. The pessimist says, God, I got to get all that shit to get the $1 million. The optimist says, all I have to do is to get all that shit to get $1 million. So it is very much about how you look at life. And look, you don't have to, you're allowed to have a downtime and then bounce back again. I think that's important as well. But you do have to think early, and it's always useful to watch others and see. I learn a lot in life and a lot in politics from my bosses and thinking, I see. That's a great lesson how they did that. I work for John Fahey, the former Premier. Great man, lovely man, died a couple of years ago, sadly, but great guy. A mad Irish Catholic and all that sort of stuff. And John did this incredible thing, Jeremy. You'd go to a meeting with him, right? So he was a minister and I was a pretty young staff member, and I worked for him a bit while I was Premier as well. You'd go to a meeting with a cabinet minister in New South Wales who would introduce you this way. Hello, Jeremy. This is John, who works with me. Not for me, with me. I tell you what, I grew about 6 foot the first time I hear it. An extra 6 foot the first time I
reckon that's better than a pay rise.
Oh, it is. Well, that's right. That's exactly right. It works with me. And it's something I adopted because I think it demonstrates to the other person, it's a demonstration of a respectful relationship. And to me, it's, he really acknowledges my contribution rather than I work for him. And it was one of those great lessons, and it was a deliberate thing for John. He had deliberately at some stage in his life and his career decided to put it that way. So, you look at that and you think, wow, that's a great lesson. You look at other things and I should never do that. Yelling at staff for no good reason, that's just not on. And everything in between.
You talk about...
So that's informal learning. There's no structure in that.
Yeah.
That's just watching.
It's just observing, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned that line from John where he said, he works with me. We have that same philosophy, whether it's the staff within our organisation or our contractor base. Yes. Albeit they're not financially our partners, in terms of working with us, but that's our approach.
Exactly.
I'll do a speech at the Christmas party, and I'll thank our partner suppliers, contractors, manufacturers, because that to us is the teamwork that sets you up for success.
That's loyalty.
And loyalty, yeah.
And you know what I reckon that means in life is if you need something done tomorrow, like a really big job done tomorrow, and you're in at 4 PM, they'll do it. If they need a bit of a break because something's gone wrong, you'll give them that break. And that give and take in life, or they call it swings and roundabouts, that's really important for people, because there will be times where you want a really trusted and really loyal person to fill a hole that's just appeared, literally the day before. And I think that makes a difference. And actually, they are financially critical to you. If they go broke, you've got to find another subby.
Correct.
So they are part of that, and that has to be a respectful relationship. One party can't take the other for granted either.
Coming back to your leadership ambitions in your 20s,
sure.
Who tapped you on the shoulder to say, geez, I think, John, you've got a bit of promise here? Who were influential in you making the decision that leadership ambitions was on the cards, on the table?
So no one tapped me on the shoulder. So I think people have this view about politics, mostly from movies and TV shows, that some godfather or godmother style figure comes to somebody and says, it's yours, we're gonna gift you this. And often you sort of get this view that this person didn't always want that job. I was the person who was ambitious. I like to think, and I hope to think, I was restlessly ambitious as opposed to ruthlessly ambitious in my life and in my career. But I always wanted, and that has a dark side as well, but I was always wanting to go forward. Having said that, when I looked to people for support, I had wonderful support. So John Fay, who was a minister, and Bruce Baird, who was the Transport Minister, when I ran for Drummoyne. Nick Greiner was the Premier. And I'd just turned 21. And Nick Greiner, so Bruce Baird and John Fay went to the Premier and said, this guy's really good, we should support him for Drummoyne. Drummoyne was a Labor seat we thought we were going to win at that point. And Nick Greiner said, and I quote, a 21-year-old running for politics is a fucking joke, quote unquote, which we laugh about these days. Yeah. And maybe he was right. But I had these people who just believed in me, and I hope I return that belief in the things that I did along the way. So some people would be attracted to you and others you'd seek to bring to you. And some of those in politics, in life, in business takeovers or whatever, you need to promise something to get some people to back you. Others will back you all day, every day. There'll be your first vote, there'll be your last vote, and you can rely on that. And that's also got to be because they believe in you. So I also, probably Ted Pickering. So Ted Pickering was the police minister from 88 in New South Wales from 88 to 93, 94, and then a year out of cabinet, then back in again. So Ted's 86 now, remained a very good friend of mine. After I worked for him, my wife Lucy worked for him through a very difficult time for Ted. And he's like a second father to me. And he was a great advisor and a great, he was a big factional boss, and which he loved. But I learned a lot of lessons on how to do that. I also learned the lesson that actually leadership is about being out ahead, not so far that they can't see you, right? You don't want to be so far ahead that people behind you can't see you anymore, which I would use as an analogy. They don't understand what you're doing. They don't know what the message is. They don't know where we're going. But they do expect you to lead from the front. So when I got elected opposition leader, I was the youngest person in the party room, and there were men in that room old enough to be my father. And I just decided, listen, I've got to work my ass off. I've got to work really hard to show them one quality of leadership, particularly from young people, is that you work hard. Some people are luckier than me. Their leadership's just displayed because they're brilliant, or they're lucky, or they're very, very wealthy. I didn't have any of those. So for me, it was hard work to display to people. I think that's one of the qualities of leadership. There are times when it's not needed. You're at a different time in your life, particularly in business. I think one of the objectives of every CEO is the joint you run can run without you for at least 6 months. So if you get hit by a bus, if you're in hospital, or if you leave out of the blue, you should have the business plan, the budget, the strategy in place to at least run for 6 months while you find another CEO. And in other words, an organisation you lead should be able to be led and should be able to run without the leader. It's a strange way to put it, but I think you know what I mean. So, yeah, I had a number of figures and lots of people who were generous enough to give me their advice when I asked for it.
I think too, good leadership is supporting the people you work with when they make mistakes.
Yeah. When I was at Landcom, I would get to a situation where I would say to my senior guys, actually, we know exactly what we're doing. The strategy is very clear, the business plan, the budget, that's all set. And in our case, often set for 3 years ahead, with property, of course, approvals, it all takes, nothing happens overnight, sadly. So that they were all in place. So I would often say to my team, how can I help? I'd get out in front and maybe front the organisation at different events and in different forums. But for them it was, what do you need to help? can I make that phone call for you, or can I help at that meeting, or do you want me to, spend some time with you or your team? So in other words, I trust you to, I'm paying you good money. I trust you to do your job. How can I help you deliver? And the other great assessment in that part of life, of course, is most people in a senior organisation getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars who report to the CEO are likely to be skilled to do their job. Like, you won't get to be the CFO of Woolworths and earn millions of dollars a year if you don't know how to be a CFO of a big company. So the question becomes really one thing: are they a cultural fit for the organisation? Now, I used to think this culture stuff was all a bit overdone, but it's not. And I met Jack Welch once. So Jack ran GE famously, and this is to your point of people when they make mistakes. And he, one of those dynamic US guys, right? I met him in Australia, and I sat on the table with him at lunch, and he just spoke brilliantly, right? But the stuff that really goes down well in America.
Well, he's all about, from what I read about him, he's a culture man plus businessman. You got to know both.
Correct. So he said there are four sorts of people in a business. So I always think of this as a box with four squares in it. He said two things: business and culture. You get the business, you get the culture, you keep that person, you promote them. You don't get the business, you don't get the culture, out. You get the culture but not the business. You give that person a second chance, a third chance. Worst person in the business, they get the business, they don't get the culture. Why? They'll never be late with the budget. They'll never lose a sale. They'll never fail to get a sales target. They'll never be late with anything they're required to do, but they don't believe in the business, in the culture of the business, and they can be poisonous. And I tell you what, I've seen that happen in life, and I've seen people, and as a consequence, I've had situations where I've said to very senior people who report to me, you're really good at your job. If you don't learn how to work properly with the team, if you don't get onto our culture, if you don't get on the bus, you got to go. Most people would say, I've heard others say, oh, geez, they're so good at that, but they're terrible to deal with. They're so rude to other people. My view is one doesn't outweigh the other. You've got to be part of the culture and then the business in that order. So Jack Welch, right, in his book tells this fantastic story. He blew up a factory. He literally blew it up working for GE. It burnt to the ground, and they made him CEO several years later. So
he got the culture.
And he got the mistake thing. They forgave him for a mistake. I think the easy way I always say to people who work for me, if I ask you a question, don't have the answer, tell me and go and get it. If you make a mistake, tell me when you've made the mistake. A great line from The Godfather, Mr. Corleone is a man who likes to hear bad news quickly. So tell me and let's work it out. If you get paid a lot of money, I pay you to bring me problems with solutions, not problems. I appreciate new junior people might just have the problem, but you should also bring me solutions to choose from. But I know we hear it a lot, don't make the same mistake twice. There's a bit of truth to that.
Fantastic. And, to your point around that mentorship, leadership, getting the culture, getting the business, you were in the business of politics. When you led the party, who were some people that you had to tell them to pull their socks up and get on the bus?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I won the ballot to be leader by one vote, 15 votes to 14.
On your birthday?
On my 33rd birthday, right, on Easter Thursday. A day I didn't pick. I didn't pick the day for the ballot. And the woman I beat, Kerry Chigorowski, a woman who I have really high regard for, I like Kerry, it was never personal, and she acknowledged that. And the fact that I had the ambition to give the leadership a crack was no surprise to anybody. What the surprise was is that the coalition that I put together to win the vote. So I was expected to lose the vote on the day, and I won by one vote. And you make two decisions, right? The car analogy, do I spend all my time looking in the rear vision mirrors, or do I just drive ahead? Well, you mostly drive ahead. You have to from time to time, but if you spend all your time looking behind you, you'll never lead, right? You'll be so worried about what that person says. So I built the thick skin, at least publicly. And then there were a couple of people as time went on where I just had to tell them mostly to work harder because you're your own boss in Parliament, and if you want to set your own pace and it's too slow, then you risk losing your seat or losing your pre-selection. And if you get away with it, that used to annoy me because that means you're not doing a job and you're still getting away with being a member of Parliament somehow. So there were a few people I lined up for not working hard enough. that's why I had to be working hard enough so I'd be able to say with evidence that I'm working hard that you should work harder. We had one instance where I decided to head off what was going to be a very difficult issue. So there was a vote on when the Parliament returned in 2003. There was a vote on equalising the age of consent for sex between adults in New South Wales. So homosexuality had been decriminalised in 1984. But the deal to get it at the time was a male and female sex, 16, male and male sex, 18. Believe it or not, nothing on female and female sex, right? People have this story, which sounds too cute to be true. Queen Victoria, who of course was Queen Empress when we wrote our criminal codes, she didn't believe there was such a thing as lesbianism. I don't know if it's true. Great story. So there was still this discrimination. So Bob Carr won the election straight in with the bill to make it 16 across all genders. Now, I knew this would be a very difficult, controversial issue for the Liberal Party, particularly some of our more conservative members. So I thought, I'm not going to force the party to have a vote, which means forcing you, maybe against your will, to vote a certain way, or forcing you maybe out of the party. So I said right up front, I said, this is a conscience vote and everybody's entitled to vote the way they want, with one exception. No one here is to criticise anyone else personally. So you can say, this is what I believe and I think that's the wrong view. If you start saying, and I think Sally Jones is a fool for supporting this, and that's not on. And it worked. It worked and it took a lot of the pressure out of it. Interestingly, I find this really interesting. Barry O'Farrell was my deputy, and Barry came to me and said, one of the backbenchers is really upset about the conscience vote. I said, why would they be upset about a conscience vote? He said, because he'd much prefer the party to lock him in, which allows him to tell the people who support the party's position, that's our position, and tell those who don't, I don't agree, but that's the party position.
He's hedged his bet.
Yeah, I thought, really, are you in politics to be that weak? There were a few difficult times, but I just got out ahead and led. And I hope that doesn't sound too arrogant or too cocky, but we were in the depths of opposition. We were in the depths of opposition, and there was only one way we had to go, and that was up. I lost the first election I ran for in 2023. We lost one member and gained one member, lost one seat, gained one seat. And then we started picking up in the polls and going forward. I also thought that when you could, there was time to be non-partisan and support the government. Having said that, I know it sounds good. No one reports it. No one ever reports, and today the opposition supported the government.
No, that's right.
And you rarely get credit for it. So, and they always want the opposition to, surprise, surprise, oppose. One other thing I did is I changed the title from Leader of the Opposition, I was still called that formally and in the Parliament, to New South Wales Liberal Leader. Because being the Leader of the Opposition is such a negative phrase, right? It's such a negative phrase. So I remember announcing that at the Liberal Party State Council with 400 or 500 people there, and they burst into applause. And I thought, that's good that they think the same way I do, but it was just trying to be more positive in the role and also take risks. It's hard to take risks in politics because things like question time, right? So you're in opposition, you rarely have all the information to ask a difficult question of the government. So sometimes we would have to literally do all the research, maybe get a leak, maybe freedom of information, maybe a conversation, piece it all together. Most times we only went having about 70 or 80% of the full knowledge of what we were asking, which leaves you 20 to 30% of making a fool of yourself in question time with the television cameras rolling and the newspapers and radio. Luckily, I don't think we ever failed on that. But a lot of people want 100% guarantee before they get out of bed in the morning. So taking that risk, taking calculated risks is important in life too.
There's a quote where leaders, they say it's lonely at the top. Do you believe that?
So when I became Leader of the Opposition was Easter Thursday. So I said to I think one of Kerry's staff came and said, look, is it okay if we clear out the office over the weekend and you come in on Tuesday? I said, of course it is. Right? It doesn't really matter where I am between now and then. So Kerry kept the car and driver for the Easter weekend. Who cares? and clean the office out whenever with her staff. So I walked into this office. It is a ridiculously large office. Like, people would laugh at it for a CEO, if you like, a leader to have an office that big these days. But it was built in the 70s and early 80s. So it was
there was no hot desking, was there?
No, God, no. So with a view of the harbour, all this sort of drama. So Kerry really professionally welcomed me. So rather than just they'd all gone, welcomed me into the office, and we sat down, we had a chat, and she left, closed the door behind her, and I went and sat at the desk. Now, this desk had nothing, not a pen, not a pencil, not a Post-it note. Fair enough, she cleaned everything out.
She took the paintings off the walls too, didn't she?
She did, which is fair enough. They were her paintings. So it was literally a completely blank room. And at that point, I realised the saying, it's lonely at the top. And but you have to embrace that. You have to embrace that. But in the bad times, it can be very lonely. There was one occasion where Barry O'Farrell came to me. We were having a difficult time on something, and he said, have the colleagues of the other MPs called you, brackets, to support me? I said, no, Barry, I worry when they don't call, not when they do call, you know. That's when you worry. So it is lonely, but you got to embrace that. And part of that is embracing the fact that at the end of the day, you make the decision. So you can bring in my style is to, and it's probably a bit more verbal than it is read, is to read, but then to bring people in, subject matter experts, and question them. And often I'll find out that I think it can go this way. They'll say, no, it's actually this way, and the like, and get their opinion. So in opposition, very tight team, very small team, very tight leadership team we had, and I'd ask people, what do you think? But at the end of the day, I'd make the decision, and people respected that because I think they also respected that I'd taken their opinions. Didn't always agree with them, but I'd taken their opinions. What I find, Jeremy, in life is in leadership, sometimes you've got to make a decision like that, right? There's just no way out. You've got to make a decision like that. And sometimes you have to make a captain's call. I remember when captain's calls were a good thing. Now they're a bad thing. But you're the captain for a reason, right? Because sometimes you've got to make a call. That if you have the time, I've always found that if I consult experts or consult the right people, I always end up with a better decision than I started with.
Well, you're not always going to have the answers.
Correct. Or they always improve it. I rarely go a different way, but they almost certainly improve it, or give me a much greater understanding, so I know if I get asked this question or if this goes wrong. And I think that's important, particularly if you trust a team. Well, you got to trust the team around you. This is business or politics or medical profession, whatever. Getting that input, getting to understand it. The other person knowing that at the end of the day, I'm the boss. I'll listen, but I mightn't agree. And if you've got that relationship, I think that's quite important. We had a guy on the board of Lifeline Australia, Jeff McClellan, and Jeff had been a partner at Herbert Smith Freehill's law firm. Lovely guy, very quietly spoken, uber smart. And we'd be like the 12 of us sitting around a table, and, you know, I'd be chairing the meeting. We'd be having ideas come together. And I always felt my role as chair was to mould a position together. I'm hearing you. I don't think, I'm hearing, okay, maybe we do. So you get this vision of putting something together, like putting a jigsaw almost together. And Jeff would, on the odd occasion, say, have we thought of doing it this way? And we'd all go, oh, my God, we were about to go down that path. Jeff, you're exactly right. That was the dumbest thing we were all going to do. And he wouldn't do it as a smart ass. He'd just do it. He'd listen, he'd absorb, he wouldn't say anything. Then he'd just use his 10 or 20 words, and we'd all go, wow. So I also like to have, where you can make it happen, a bit of a contrarian around the table. The 12th man, whatever you might call them, who will have a different view.
Yeah.
Not always just for the sake of it. You don't want somebody who's a contrarian just to be a smart aleck. But if you want someone who's going to give you the other view, it's really actually quite important. That movie, World War Z, have you seen that with the zombies?
No, I haven't.
It's got Brad Pitt in it. This is probably not an off-quoted movie in leadership discussions, but he lands in Israel. So the world's being taken over by zombies. He lands in Israel because Israel's the only place that's surrounded by a wall where the zombies haven't got in. And he gets picked up by this guy. Brad Pitt's with the UN trying to solve the world going zombie. He picks up this guy and he said, we have a thing since the 6 Day War, we have this thing where whenever we meet to discuss very serious issues at a high level, someone is required to take the opposite view, to argue, like whatever it is. We're going north, that person is required to argue for going south. And I thought, the smart thing about that is it pushes you to justify north harder. It's a bit like I always, on big things in life, I try to have a plan B. If it doesn't work, that's plan A. If it doesn't work, what's my plan B? And, on the occasions I've done that, having a good plan B always makes plan A better. Because you think, well, what if, actually, the way I can avoid doing that in plan B is doing it right in plan A.
Plan A, that's right.
So
I think also having the philosophy from a leadership perspective, in our organisation specifically, we have a saying, we've always done it this way. How do we do it better?
Yeah, sure. Great. Isn't that great?
Not the polar opposite, which is typical of hearing, people say, I've always done it this way, I'm not going to change.
Yeah. So I'm not as harsh as I thought I was going to be when people say, oh, well, no, we do it, John, this way because we've always done it that way. Because the next question is, tell me why. Tell me why we did it. Oh, we've done it that way since 1990. What happened in 1990? Because often those things are a reaction. I went to run the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Minor thing, there were 2 doors to the lifts from the office. One of them was permanently locked, which means it was like a rush getting people in and out this small other door. And I said, why is that door locked? Why can't we access it in and out? Well, 3 years ago, somebody came in and stole a computer from the office, so it's been locked since then. I said, can't we get can't we do better? Maybe get a
swipe tag or something.
Correct, a swipe tag on that door. Oh, yeah, so we did that. So it's always important to know why that happened, because if it was a reaction to something at the time, that's no longer relevant, because there will be times when we do it this way because we've always done it this way. So it's also helpful to have a bit of grey hair around the table who will say, I know you think we don't need to do it that way anymore, but I just want to tell you why I think we do. Once again, it's having the discussion. But yes, people having a bit of grey hair around the table, having a bit of contrary around the table. A lot of leaders don't like that because that means there are people disagreeing with them. I like to say there are a couple of big decisions we made at Lifeline where I lost, like 11 votes to 1. I lost 11 to 1. People used to say Nick Reiner in cabinet, he'd always win 1 to 19 of the 20 members. It just depends what your style is. And then what the willingness of others is to support the fact that something may have gone wrong along that journey, or it all may be a disaster. And are you willing to say, I'm sorry, not blame others, right? Because that's back to, ultimately I made the decision. If the advice was bad, different story. In front of everybody you said that was black, it ended up being orange. I made a decision based on it being orange. It's been a disaster because I found out later it was black. Now that's you're getting into sackable territory for me.
Coming back to early 2000s in the leadership role, do you think your heart...
How old were you? You're at bloody primary school.
I was born in 1991.
Oh, God, I don't want to hear this.
So like I said, I'm running Encore Building Group.
Yeah, well done.
General manager at 33.
Good on you.
Not leading a political party at 33.
Well, yeah.
Geez, even when you were talking about coming into politics at 21, I'd only been 2 or 3 years into my apprenticeship at that stage. I was still playing footy and loving life. So I think it's remarkable what you've done in your journey in your early 20s.
Well, you're very kind to say all that. If I'd been Premier, I would have been a bit better Premier for having more experience than... So if I'd won at 34, yes, I'd get a few records, but there was things I didn't know. I remember when I left politics, I got a job as CEO of a joint called Manchester Unity. So we had 400 staff around nursing homes, retirement villages, an old life insurance book and health insurance. And I remember so well the Friday of the first week, I remember at the end of the day, I got up and walked to the window. We were over at St Leonard's on the north side of Sydney, and I looked back sort of symbolically to the city, symbolically to Parliament House. And I think I said it out loud, God, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before.
Yeah. And sometimes you just got to learn that stuff.
Looking back from, you're in your mid-50s now, self-confidence versus arrogance, what life lesson has it taught you? It's a very fine line. And not only that, you had that very much, I've got to work hard, harder than anyone else. Yeah. Bob Carr then announces that he's
going
retiring.
Yep.
You're getting momentum.
Yep.
Talk to us a bit about what happened after that and the lead up to, ultimately the negative in the end of your political career.
Sure. So I said before I had all this confidence publicly. So I have depression and I have suicidal ideation. Depression, I think most people understand. Suicidal ideation for me means that when things go wrong, usually reputationally, like I can cop a business thing going wrong, or I could deal with a political thing going wrong. When it's about me and that's in the papers or whatever public, I catastrophise things very quickly, and I can very quickly start thinking about killing myself and how to do it. So that's part of my makeup, and I try and get better at learning how to deal with that. So when I turned 50, people say it's just another birthday. It was a very reflective moment for me, and I look back on a number of things, and I actually remember being suicidal in its own way when I was a kid, when mum and dad were fighting and screaming and all that sort of stuff, and we were so upset. I didn't know how I was going to kill myself, but even back then I thought I just need to go. I need to go away and kill myself, sort of thing. So I'd only realised then how hard-coded that was into me as part of my makeup. So there was the public John Brogden, there was the private John Brogden. So privately, publicly I'm doing all these things, getting better at them, shit shower, shave, go to Parliament, put a suit on, whatever. All that stuff I was getting better and better at. Behind the scenes I was getting worse and worse. So outside the public eye, I was inconsolably miserable, particularly at home with my wife. So Lucy was strongly of the view that I had a mental health issue, and I don't know.
Did she realise it then, or was it on reflection?
Absolutely.
And had she raised it with you?
Well, there was lots of difficult times when I was a kid that my brother would say, when I had my suicide attempt, my brother came to see me in hospital and he said, your problem is all that shit we had as kids, you buried it very deep and it was always going to come out. And he was so right. He was so right. So that stuff was bubbling along and to a conclusion where something would happen. So, yes, I did sort of I did go along with the fact that I had some form of mental illness, but I couldn't slow down. I remember Barry O'Farrell came to me and said, John, you need to slow down. You need to slow down. The election's a couple of years away. I said, no, Barry, I need to speed up. Like, what do you think? Like, I remember Barry leaving the office and I thought, what are you talking about? Of course we need to go faster. So I was just spinning faster and faster. There was a level of manic behaviour in that. So the high highs and the low lows, although I don't have bipolar. So my life was like going to a supermarket or a shopping centre. You get on the ground floor, you go up on the escalators, you get off the escalators. So that was, for me, being a Member of Parliament at 27 and going to my first school reunion after 10 years as a Member of Parliament. Most people would be pretty happy with that. No, we're in the next set of escalators, level 2, Shadow Minister, level 3, Opposition Leader, level 4 was Premier. But for me, I was never able to stop and smell the roses, never able to say, you've done well. Not in an arrogant way, but I lacked extraordinary self-confidence internally. So
you feel like you had a point to prove, do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting. Gee, no one's ever asked me that question. I need to reflect on that. But it was like, and many people who have mental illness or particularly with depression will say this, there's the public you and there's the real you. And for me, people say you have a uniform on. For me, I did have a uniform. This was the, suit and tie in Parliament. That was the uniform. Some wear a military uniform, others are doctors with swabs on, all of that sort of stuff. So for me, I almost had something to hide behind. So something was always going to go wrong. When Lucy and I look back at it, we always knew something was going to go wrong. And so as you said, Bob Carr retired after 10 years. We had planned that he would retire. We'd done the work on who we thought would be his successor, and we were right. It was Morris Yemma. Morris, lovely bloke. We're quite friendly these days. He was so unknown, the Labor Party had to run radio and television ads saying, oh, who's that new guy who's the Premier? Morris Yemma. No, it's Yemma. Like they actually had to run ads to how to pronounce his name. He and I laugh about that these days. So that meant that he was a minister, but he'd come sort of from here. Carr was here. I was slowly doing that. Then bang, Carr goes, I'm here. This bloke's coming from nowhere-ish. So the gates of heaven open for me. And if you look at politics, you quite often see long-term leader leaves, short-term leader takes over, opposition wins. You see that often, very often. And
you'd lost to Bob previously.
Yes, I had, but I always thought I'd lose that election. I always, because they outpaced us like 5-1 on fundraising and expenditure, and I was a very new product, right? The benefit I had is I didn't have baggage. I was young. That cut two ways. I'm too young. Some thought I was too young. Others thought I was ready. What people said to me, Jeremy, is not this time, next time.
Almost the football analogy. You've got to lose one to win one.
Exactly. And I always knew that because that Nick Greiner had been like that. Lots of leaders had lost one before they won one because losing one, as I said earlier, that's where you get your mettle from. That's where you get your steel internally from. So I thought when people said to me, not this one, next one, like people were saying to me on the Friday and the Saturday, Friday before and the Saturday election, mate, you're going to lose this one, you'll win the next one. What I hoped that meant is I'd pick up a few seats and then pick up the next round, the election after. No, we stayed exactly the same. They really meant it. I'm not voting for you this time, but I'll give you a crack next time. I didn't get to the next time. But even though the heaven opened up to me, there was a event on, one of the industry bodies had an event. I've never blamed the grog. If you look at how people write it up, they suggest I was drunk. I wasn't drunk. I'd had 3 beers. I wasn't drunk. And I tell you that because I don't want to blame the grog. I don't want me to say, I just blame the grog, I was drunk. I wasn't drunk. I was uninhibited, partly because all of a sudden I'm in the box seat. But I said and did some stupid things that later became public. And I knew then that I wouldn't be able to survive as a leader when all that went public. And I decided to resign as leader. Straight away, I probably had a view that, look, I'll do some time on the backbench, then maybe I'll come back and maybe I'll be treasurer one day or have a big job. That was my thinking. So it was strategic, but I knew I couldn't survive. And it was the things I'd said and done were shameful and I thought had embarrassed me and my family, my wife, and also people who had supported me. The party didn't want me to go. I remember 2 MPs coming into my office screaming at me, don't you bloody resign, like, you can get through this. And what I say is, as an advisor, I could have got you through it, I could have got you through it, I couldn't get myself through it. And that's that whole public thing, that public-facing shame and the suicide. So it all fell to pieces. The media kept going for me the next day, and that afternoon I decided to take my own life. I thank God I was unsuccessful in my suicide attempt. And I've had a life and a career afterwards that I probably never thought I'd have, both in terms of personal relationships, in terms of opportunities to do things for organisations like Lifeline, having great jobs. I've been really lucky to have some great jobs and do more. And I look back, when I left politics, our oldest boy was 18 months old. He's now 21 and a half. And he... Kids suffer in politics. Families suffer heavily in politics. A guy I went to school with, his name was John Whelan. His dad, Paul Whelan, was the member for Ashfield. And he went into Parliament, I think, in 78 and was a minister. And then I remember it was 1984. We were in the Year 10 playground at school and his dad was dumped from the cabinet to the backbench. I remember saying, John, I'm really sorry to hear about your father. Why? Because I read the Herald every day. I'm such a dag. I said, I'm really sorry to hear about your father. He said, I'm not. I'll never forget it. I'm not. We'll have him back again. And that never left me because I just remember how tough politics is on the kids, particularly when they're really young, because they just don't see you and all those formative times. Now, that happens with people who run their own businesses and plumbers who work on Saturdays. And it happens. It's not unique to politics. But the thing that adds to politics is not only that they don't see you at home, they probably see you on the news, and when things go wrong, other kids in the playground laugh at them. So my life probably had to get to that darkest of darkest points for me to bounce back. That's a challenging thing to say. For many people who've had that experience, it's the same. It had to get that bad for me. A bit like alcoholics, I had to be found sleeping in a gutter for me to realise I have to, get off the grog or whatever it might be. And I know people who have got off drugs because they just got to a point where, they were exasperated and knew it was doing much more harm than good for them. So for me, I needed to do that to bounce back. It was an extraordinary time. It's 20 years ago next month, believe it or not. And I don't quite know how I feel about that anniversary now, but it was it was a difficult time, but with an incredible outpouring of support from. So we got 10,000 emails, letters, faxes. You'll have to explain that to a certain people in the audience who don't know what a fax is. Cards, gifts, all this sort of stuff from 10,000 people I'd never met.
I remember you wrote and spoke about one letter in particular, and it was a bloke from the Northern Territory, and he didn't even get your name right.
That's right. So this guy wrote, it's on fluoro yellow paper, and at the corner it said, Post Restaurant, Darwin, Northern Territory. I had no idea what that means. That means you're going into the GPO, the General Post Office in Darwin, to pick up your mail. So you're travelling around, right? So I had this vision of this bloke in a blue singlet, a pair of stubbies and a hat and a
Cobra.
Yeah, that's right. Driving around in this beat-up old four-wheel drive. And the letter said, now, my name's Brogden, B-R-O-G-D, and the letter said, Dear Mr. Ogden. But the gold was in this one sentence. We all make mistakes, comma, that's why pencils have rubbers on the other end, full stop. And if I ever wrote an autobiography, that'd probably be the title of it.
That needs to be framed.
Yeah. It was, and I still haven't read them all of those letters, because it was obviously very emotional. But the outpouring was incredible. And really for the year afterwards, because I had to spend a bit of time recovering mentally more than physically. And
what was that recovery like? Because they call it a sawtooth recovery, don't they?
Absolutely right. So, one day up, down, up, down, up, down. But like a saw, hopefully you're getting better. So for me it was couldn't get out of bed, got out of bed, couldn't have a shower, got out of shower, couldn't get dressed, got dressed, couldn't leave the house, those sorts of things. So after a while I couldn't watch news or read newspapers for almost a year. It was so traumatic for me. So I had to get another job. I was 36 years old. So I started going back into town, and I couldn't look people in the eye, be walking on the street looking at the footpath. And almost every day, it felt like every day I was out in public for the year after that suicide attempt. People would stop me and say, mate, I'm really sorry what happened to you. You didn't deserve it or whatever it might be. Get back on your feet. And I got a lot of people who would say, I've been exactly where you've been, or my brother killed himself or tried to kill himself, or I have depression. All of a sudden you realise you're in a very big family. Yeah. You're in a very big percentage of the population. So what I experienced was very little judgment for what I'd done. I even got a letter from George Pell, Cardinal George Pell, who was a very strict Catholic. Suicide's a sin.
Well, it used to be illegal. And the Catholic Church wouldn't bury someone who committed suicide.
Exactly. Nor would any of the other Christian churches or the Muslims or the Jews. No one would. So that letter meant a lot. And he said, it was a very, very kind letter. I'm only writing to see how you are and send you my best. Like literally, that was it. And when you get that sort of lack of judgment, that was important. John Laws, the radio legend, he had beaten me up the day before for what I'd said and done. And then I resigned, and then I tried to kill myself. And he wrote this beautiful letter, which was, if I had anything to do that pushed you, anything to do with you going over the edge, I'm really sorry. And that's pretty classy, right? That was pretty classy. So from that perspective, there was an incredible outpouring of support and love, actually, love and generosity. And that set me on a path. But if that had happened to me 20 or 30 years before, I probably would have been shunned, probably unemployable. Yeah,
and such a high profile that you had. Yeah. You probably didn't realise it at the time, and it's catastrophic what happened. You became an advocate overnight.
Yeah, I made the decision, Jeremy, that there are two ways to go. And I don't judge either of these options. One is I'm going to go back to private life and not talk about this at all and move on. The other is the view I took, which is it was a privilege to be a Member of Parliament, an extraordinary privilege to be the alternate Premier and the leader of my political party. So they gave me a profile. Places like St Patrick's had given me the chance to speak and learn how to speak and debate and things like that. Putting all of that together, I thought I'll become an advocate for suicide prevention and for a better understanding of how this happens, why it happens, and what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen. And that probably very much came together when I joined the board of Lifeline and later became the chairman.
Speaking about Lifeline, but also mental health and normalising that that's grown, and it's a huge community now where you've got Are You OK Day, the one specific example. The advocacy work has shone a light on mental health. I think we've normalised it. It's a bit like, you pull a muscle at the gym or playing footy, you go to the physio.
Exactly. And
mental
nobody
health
judges you.
No, that's right. Mental health now, I think we do talk a lot about it. There's still more to do, no doubt.
Yeah.
But mental health, if you're not feeling right, it should be like going to your GP to get a prescription.
Exactly. It's okay not to be okay.
That's right.
And I said this a lot, and Lifeline said this a lot during COVID. It's okay not to be okay. Fascinating thing about COVID, I'll come back to Lifeline. During COVID, suicide in Australia dropped by 4%.
Wow.
Now that's a bigger, and it stayed there. Sadly, after COVID, it's gone back to where it was.
So the current stat, correct me if I'm wrong, is 3,100 Australians commit suicide?
So it's, an average of 8 or 9 a day.
Which is double the rate of the deaths on roads.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And 7 men, 2 women. So it's a very, men use more certain methods of suicide than women do, and I'll leave that to people's thinking. I like to say the objective is to normalise mental illness. It's normal for people to have depression. It's normal for people to have heart disease. It's normal for people to have skin cancer, etc. Have you done something like spend too much time in the sun or eaten a lot of rubbish to make that worse? Have you drunk too much that is bad for your mental health? Yes, maybe, but there's no shame in having mental health. There's no shame in having a congenital heart disease. We actually don't want to normalise suicide. It's not normal to kill yourself. It's normal to live. It's normal to want to live. So this can be seen as a controversial view. It's not a moral judgment. It's not values or a religious judgment. It's just me saying we don't want to say it's all right to kill yourself. We want to say how can we help you stay alive?
Yep.
They're very different things. Should you be judged for getting to that dark point? No. Should you be judged if you die? Should the family be judged? No. So that's not a nuance. It's quite an important difference. But no, Lifeline, what a pleasure to be associated with such an incredible organisation that saves lives every day. Every day.
That number's 13 11 14.
That's correct. Or online as well. And we also provide a text service.
So when it first started, I don't think there were too many households that necessarily had a phone at home. Talk to me about how it all came about.
Yeah.
And what it is today.
So in 1961, the guy who ran what we now know as the Wesley Mission in Pitt Street in Sydney was the Reverend Dr. Alan Walker, later Sir Alan Walker. And he was probably the biggest high-profile Protestant churchman of his time, like Tim Costello is today. If you think of Protestant leaders, back then you'd think of Alan Walker. So he ran what was Wesley, then the Methodist Central Mission, and he was the superintendent. He got a phone call at his home on a Sunday night from a guy who said, "Hello, I'm Roy. You don't know who I am. I'm going to kill myself and I want to tell you why." So I'd always known that part of the story. It was only around our 50th anniversary I learned the other half of the story, which is the next day or day after, Alan Walker got a phone call from the police at King's Cross and they said, "Are you Alan Walker?" He said, "Yes, I am." He said, "We have a dead body here with a letter pinned to the shirt with your name on it." So to his everlasting credit, he decided for people who get to that dark point in life, we need a lifeline for them. It's always good to be associated with a charity where you know what the title means. It tells you what it means. And the two remarkable things about that, Jeremy, suicide was still a crime in many jurisdictions in 1961. And it was certainly a sin in the eyes of almost every church. As you said before, you couldn't have your funeral in a Catholic church. You wouldn't be buried in a Catholic cemetery, as well as every other faith had this very, very negative view.
I'm sure as well back then it was covered up, had a heart attack, cancer, whatever.
Spot on. So I've met retired police officers who said to me, "Oh yeah, we'd turn up to the garage, we'd cut the bloke down, we'd rearrange the scene, and the ambos would turn up and you get to hospital in the morgue and they'd say, misadventure, died by misadventure or a heart attack." They'd make it up to relieve the family of the shame that would come from that people wouldn't talk about it, but they stopped talking to them. There was something wrong with that family. Took him 2 years to get Lifeline going. So on the 16th of March, day before St Patrick's Day, the 16th of March 1963, Lifeline started. And from that day, it's been answering phone calls, now texts and now chats, 24 hours 7. And it's an incredible service, mostly staffed by volunteers, incredible volunteers. And these are volunteers, you don't ask them to come and do their kids' barbecue for an hour on Saturday when their kid's playing soccer. You ask them to get on the phone for 4 hours or more, once a fortnight at least, and listen to people who are at very dark points in their life and bring them back around. And because we're anonymous, one of the key things about Lifeline is we're anonymous. Because think of this, I'm feeling like I want to kill myself. I'm so ashamed. I can't tell my best friend, my wife, my husband, my mate, can't tell anyone, but I am happy to ring up and speak to a complete stranger who I'll never meet in my life, likely. So that's an extraordinary concept. So part of our proposition and our guarantee is it's anonymous. We don't want to know, we don't need to know who you are. So we're not going to judge you. So it's non-judgmental and it's anonymous. As a consequence, we don't know how many lives Lifeline will save today. We just don't know because we don't follow people through. It's not like a medical research where we know your name and we follow you through and a year later you are or aren't better based on a new drug. It's nothing like that. So as a consequence, I still get people walk up to me on Martin Place in the middle of the day and say, oh, John, I just want you to, no, I don't know who they are. John, I just want you to know I rang Lifeline. It's always 20 or 30 years ago.
Yep.
And I say, how was it? They always say they listened. It's the first thing they'll say. And I said, and you're still here, so it saved your life? They said, absolutely. So that's reward enough for all the volunteering I did for Lifeline on the board and as chair and as an advocate. Because it does make a difference. It's also important for people to know if you're worried about your mate or your spouse or whatever it might be or somebody in the workplace, you can ring Lifeline to get some advice on how you might approach that person.
Yeah, so I was going to say, this is not just for someone who's in crisis, but it's friends, family.
Exactly. And it's getting an understanding of what to say because most people think, I don't know what to say. Gee, I mean, we're great mates, but and if I talk about suicide, do I run the risk of putting that thought in his or her mind? The reality is the best way, and all the science backs this, all our practice backs this. So the best way to do it is to ask that question directly. Do you feel like killing yourself? Do you feel like hurting yourself? What an extraordinary question to have to ask somebody. Wow. I mean, you're right out of your bloody zone, aren't you, your comfort zone? But it's critical that you're willing to ask that question because that forces the truth out of them. If you say to them, how you going? Most people are pretty good at bullshitting their way through that. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, I'm all right. This has gone wrong. But, it's the challenge with Are You OK Day, which is excellent, is you got to ask it 3 times. Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah, mate, I'm fine. We're really good at that in Australia. It's no, are you okay? You got to really, and sometimes you'll find people saying, oh, look, I'm not great. This has happened,
Bit stressed.
Yeah,
whatever
or,
it is.
I owe a lot of money, or I'm, got a gambling issue, whatever it might be. So you do have to be direct.
Talk to me about the stats in terms of age demographic now, because I know it's happening a lot. So 7 out of 10 male.
Yep, 7 out of 9. Yep.
7 out of 9 male. Not only that, they're over 60 is what I'm hearing.
So the numbers are interesting. Most of us think that youth suicide is growing. It's actually not. In the last set of stats, it's reduced. Not massively, but it's gone backwards. So let's split the odds and say it's static, it's flat. That's a great achievement. However, young people presenting for mental illness has gone through the roof, but suicides aren't going up. So that's good news. It's good news because they're asking help. It's bad news if they can't get the help when they need it. And it's good news if the numbers are flattening out. The growth in suicide is men over 65, 75 and 85. And this is where I get a chance to get on my soapbox a bit. Men should never properly retire, by which I mean we men tend to see ourselves through our career, through our persona as I was a copper, I was a plumber, I was a doctor, right? Women are much better. They see themselves through all facets of their life, maybe as a mother or a sister or whatever, and a doctor. So many men go from a full-time job, often an important job, often one where they've got to sign off $1 million payments every week, like significant responsibility. And the next decision is what time do I tee off or when do I have my cappuccino down the road? That's sort of the best thing for those people is where they can stay working 2 days a week or take up a hobby, get involved in Lifeline, go and volunteer for Lifeline. go and join a Rotary. My old man, Dad's 92, carpenter from the age of 15 to the age of 65. Day he finished working, he took up almost full-time volunteering. Got an Order of Australia at the age of 89 for his volunteering. You know how they sash bulls at the Royal Easter Show? They sashed him at the Royal Easter Show as the volunteer of the show or something. He'd done volunteering there for 25 years. It was almost his new job, and that's how he treated it. Very fulfilling, kept him busy.
Gives you purpose.
Gives you purpose, yes, spot on, gives you purpose. And men, I think, need purpose in life. Now, their purpose might be, I'm picking up the grandkids from school every day, or, you know, it doesn't have to be external. It can be inside your family. But purpose is really important for men, and that's why we worry about that increase in suicide.
My father turned 70 on the 19th of August.
Right.
He's just taken up a new job.
Good.
As a contractor, full-time, it was 4 days a week.
Yeah.
He's exhausted, you know, now he's back at the gym, but he's got purpose.
But he's loving it.
Loving it.
Yeah.
And my mother said, I don't want you to resent, if you're not ready to retire now, I don't want to be the person that you're resenting because I said no.
Yeah. There's also that other great line of the man retires and the wife says, I married you for breakfast and dinner, not for lunch.
It's probably too much time they spend together. So she's saying, when are you getting out of the house?
Yeah, that's right.
We are so connected now. You know, bullying used to happen in the playground, call someone fat, ugly. That now has come through to social media.
Exactly.
You know, all these young kids now. I've got a 5-month-old, and I reflect on some of this stuff too, to think, what's George going to be experiencing when he gets to St. Pat's?
Sure.
He's enrolled for 2035,
Good
by
man.
the way. What does that look like in this ever-changing environment? And I'm sure people stay awake. Their parents would be staying awake at night because they don't necessarily have full exposure to what's happening.
I'm of the view, and I support the current ban on social media for kids under 16, acknowledging it's going to be hard to enforce and people will find a way around. But I think part of that message is that social media is not our friend for young people. There's more bad than there is good. And I think what's also happened is with social media, people say things online they'd never say to you face to face. So they might say in the playground, you're fat and ugly. Online, they say you're fat and ugly and you could kill yourself. You should kill yourself. And that's happened. People have killed themselves based on being bullied through social media, for God's sake. So you're right, we're more connected than ever, but it's not all for an upside. And that's challenging. And I also think you can be lonely in plain sight. So from the day Lifeline started answering calls in 1963, we've had lonely people call us. We were the only voice all day that talks back to them. Got the radio going on the TV, we're the only voice that talks back to them. And that still continues. And one of the challenges with becoming a demographically very different world where not as many people marry, not as many people partner up, is you've got more single people who are at risk of loneliness. Not that it's only single people. So, yes, you can be lonely in plain sight. People can say, he's works with interesting people, does that and does that. It doesn't mean they're not feeling very lonely in life. David Cameron, the former UK Prime Minister, actually established a Minister for Loneliness. Don't know if it made any difference, but it was an identification of the enormous number of lonely people we have and what that does to their physical health and mental health.
Well, John, I think we should wrap it up here. It's been wonderful to speak with you and understand your journey. It's still going. You know, you're talking about semi-retirement. I don't think that's on the cards for you anytime soon. But to quote our college great motto, Luceat lux vestra, let your light shine. Yep. You're doing that, and you're a wonderful advocate for politics, leadership, but most importantly, mental health space. So
thanks, mate.
Congratulations, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Jeremy.
Cheers.
See you.